Hey guys, it's Bailey here. This is the first installment of CedhTheLost, the podcast that we're basing out of the Pacific Northwest. I'm here joined with two friends, brothers, enemies. We have
Mostly enemies.
mostly enemies, but we have Dylan. He lives in Arizona right now. Kind of weird for the Pacific Northwest, but he's here.
I'm a traitor.
And then we have, which casually, we all have one thing in common. We love playing bad decks historically, which is what the episode is about. But before we get into that, why are we doing a podcast? Well, we thought it would be fun. It's just fun. But going into that, we wanted to give a little bit of background of the people who are going to be on the podcast. Obviously, it's going to be under my YouTube channel, but I want it to be more of a community thing, based off of anyone in the CDH realm of the Pacific Northwest, specifically in Whatcom County. And so anyone in the Whatcom County area who wants to be on a podcast will have the opportunity to be. But my story of how I got into CDH was, out of high school, I played a little bit with like my friends in the cafeteria and the library, stuff like that. But standard and singleton, and 1v1 formats were where my jam was at, and I put Magic aside for 3 years when I started playing football. I dedicated my life to football, and then I got super injured my junior year, and the doctor was like, you should probably stop playing football. So I did, and then I bounced around with a bunch of different activities, and then I found Magic again, and instead of standard or modern or any of the 1v1 formats, the blooming thing was Commander. And at first I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but it grew on me a little bit, and I started going to our weekly Commander things at Heroes Resource, which is now Meeple Manors. And a random guy came in and took over. His name was Brandon. He saw me and was like, I want to play more Magic with him, which I'm grateful he did. So I would go over to his house and we would just jam CDH games with him, his brother, some of our other friends, and we would just jam for hours on hours, almost every night for like a solid summer. And I fell in love with CDH because I was allowed to pub stomp in a way where I can play all the powerful stuff and I didn't have to care about people's feelings. And he left to go run another store's commander events, and I took over the reins. So I was a TO for like a year and a half, 2 years, but now that's out of the way. So I get to record a podcast now and play Magic, which is exciting.
Good times ahead.
Yeah, good times ahead. I don't know what's ahead for me, but my Tuesdays,
Freedom.
they're open now.
Freedom is ahead, baby.
Hopefully. But now we have Dylan. He has a pretty interesting story, I fear.
Okay, so I have been playing Magic for 9, 10-ish years. My older sister got into it a long time ago. We played a lot of Modern. I got pub stomped by Gideon and was like, screw this format. And then we played Standard all the way up until we moved from Utah to Washington, where we moved the same day that Meeple Manors was opening. That was fun. I got to meet the Magic community, and then Wizards essentially killed Standard, just slightly, by printing Oko and Uro and Nexus of Fate, all those fun little Standard gems. So, me and my older sister moved on to playing Commander when COVID hit. We're like, hey, let's check out this new format that seems cool. We played throughout the entirety of COVID. And then when Meeple Manor finally opened back up, Bailey was running Commander, and I got to just play. And then one day Brandon was like, hey, you want to try CDH? And I was like, sure, why not? So my incredibly underpowered mono red Feldon deck got a bunch of fast mana in it, and I just went and jammed some CDH games, and it was a good time. And then, I don't know, 6-ish months later, um, a tournament popped up called Oktoberfest. And I was like, I want to go to this tournament. So I took my casual deck, which at the time was Atla Palani, um, and turned it into a CDH deck, which was heavy stacks at the time, and which was interesting. But I went to Oktoberfest, got destroyed because it was, at the time, the largest tournament. And from there, I convinced Bailey to just go through tournament to tournament with me, and we just grinded tournaments for like, I don't know, what, 8 months, something like that. Essentially till I left for college. Um, and then now the closest place for tournaments is Utah. I've gone down a few times, but I eventually switched to Rocco, which is less of a fringe deck. And then, I mean, that's my story. That's how I got into CVH. Great format.
Yeah, we did like 5 tournaments in 6 weeks or something like that.
It was
We
we had we had 3 in 3 days.
yeah,
We went to a tournament on a Friday, and then a Saturday, and then a Sunday.
yeah.
It
I think if I
was
tried that, my mind would melt. I
Our
don't have
minds
that
didn't
capacity
oh
melt.
for Magic. Yeah, that makes
we were
sense.
that was
Trying to
when I picked
jam
up
game after
Time.
game.
Yeah, you were playing Time at the time.
Yeah, the second time I played it, took what, second? Where
Yeah,
Karkashima absolutely destroyed us.
yeah,
That was interesting.
Fukushima's a deck to play
It's a deck.
against. One of the decks
Yeah.
of all time, certainly.
true. And then we
Well,
have Nick here. He's newer to Magic as a whole, but still a talented player.
yeah, I suppose that does leave me. I picked up Magic right when Kamigawa was coming out, so that was the first set I played with. And I went straight into Commander. I didn't have any experience with singleton formats. The first deck I built was an Ishin deck, and it was constructed from the contents of 2 bundles. So as you can imagine, not a very good deck. It got absolutely pub stomped by a precon. But I mean, from the very beginning of Magic, I was working and building my own deck, so I kind of had an interesting start to the game. It took me a while going to local stores before I got anywhere near into CDH, but I think what drew me to it was the attitude surrounding it was a little bit different. There was no complaining about certain cards or play styles. Everyone was just doing their best to win the game and perform at a high level, and that kind of drew me to it. And the first deck I took to CDH, well, it wasn't very CDH, but it was built around Anji Falconwrath, the Madness Commander. And within that deck, you're playing a lot of cards with the keyword Madness, and most of those cards are not very good. They're just there to trigger the ability of the commander. But I found a lot of weird ways to get unique value out of those cards. And I think a big part of what drew me to playing more fringe decks was the success I saw with playing weird cards in Anji and how some of them could function. Like, I think the biggest example of that is a silly little card called Muckdrub, which is objectively a terrible card. It's a 5-mana flash creature. When it enters the field, it changes the target of a single spell that has a single creature target to Muckdrub. But at one point, someone was attempting to remove Anji over the top of my win, and I was able to tap Anji, discarding it, cast it with flash speed off of the Madness trigger, and proceed to go off and win the game from there. And it's because of those silly little cards that kind of drew me to playing more fringe decks. Just gotcha moments where people have no idea what's happening when the strangest card pulls out the win.
Yeah, it is. That's like the whole reason you play Fringe is to have like an upper hand against your opponents where they don't know what your game plan is and you don't know which axis you're going to attack on. Um, like I played Fibblefip. I have a Fibblefip primer right now. I've been on a podcast for it, but Fibblefip is a great example of a Fringe deck. You'll sit down at a tournament and they just won't know what you're doing. They're like, you have a 2-mana 1/1 that draws you a card, so it's like just incidental value. You're not winning with it. And then you play a Proteus Staff on turn 4, activate it. They have a removal spell, but they're like, oh, you're gonna go get a Hullbreaker Horror. But then when you put Fibblefip back out, they're so confused and lost, and then you just win the game, and they're like, huh? How were you able to do that? Because most of the time when you play like a Fringe deck, they're going to have a unique win line. Like Ala Polani, you have a Changeling that has a 0 cost ability where you can turn everything's power and toughness into a 0/0. But if you give that creature a +1/+1 counter or a +1/+1 boost till end of turn, and then Atla that as well, you get to loop through your entire deck and do a bunch of weird combos that way, including like Kiki Jiki making infinite creatures and stuff like that. And it's just a super cool way to win the game because you're not doing the Thassa's Oracle Underworld Breach strategy most of the time.
And I think one of the things we wanted to highlight about Fringe decks is the definition of Fringe is more of a deck that doesn't see as much play. And the advantage you're getting out of that is the knowledge part. People don't understand your win lines, what your deck's game plan is. And I think a great example of that was Fringe once was Magda. It came out of nowhere. It really took the competitive scene by surprise, and it picked up a lot of wins in tournaments. And it succeeded. Its success has dropped off a little bit, and I think that's because now people have adapted. They know what the deck does. They know its play patterns, and it doesn't have that Fringe advantage anymore as it's become more of a popular deck.
Yeah, it's weird because like you can even look at like a Kenrith, where Kenrith wasn't played for 2 years, and then Kenrith came back into popularity, at least in the Pacific Northwest. We see Kenrith all the time win so many tournaments now, but it came back and it was Fringe, and people didn't know how to stop it because they didn't understand like the Vimage combos with Kenrith and the different ways Kenrith can accrue you value over the game. And of course, talented pilots will make or break any deck. Like Fringe decks, if you're a good pilot, you can win with any deck, and then even a bad pilot can win with a blue farm deck. But you really need to understand the game of CDH in order to pilot your Fringe deck to success, which I think is another added bonus of playing a Fringe deck, is because you are playing CDH in hard mode majority of the time, and it's such a cool way to play the game.
Yeah, and I think if you're playing a Fringe deck, on top of all the other advantages you have, you're going to sit down at the table, and they're going to look at your commanders, and they're going to be like, "You're doing nothing in this game." Like currently, I'm playing Propsa and Kuros, which is a deck that people are like, "Oh, you're just going to like, I don't know, jam something in your graveyard," and then I go cast Ashnod's Altar, win the game. Not Ashnod's Altar, Altar of the
Dementia.
Dementia. See, I know my own decks.
A little bit of irony there.
True.
Yeah. But it's just like the number of times I've sat down across from people, especially when I was playing Atla, people would just see the deck and they'd be like, "Oh, I've heard of this," and then just ignore it. And I'd be like, "Okay, turn 2, I would like to cast this Goblin Recruiter and present a win." And people would just be taken aback and they're like, "Wait, hold up. You're playing a bad deck." And I'm like, "Yes, but
You
it's
just
still
lost to the bad deck,
CDH."
so now what?
Yeah. Like they just don't know how to understand your wins, and I think it's because CDH is still a small community. It's a growing one. It's a rapidly growing one, but it's still small. And there's only like 10 YouTube channels that do gameplay videos, and that's the 10 YouTube channels that people learn the decks from, or playing in person and playing against the decks. But you only have one video from each of them a week, let's say. That's 520 videos. That's only 2,000 different decks. A little more than 2,000 different decks that you're going to see. But majority of those decks are going to be Rogsai, Blue Farm, all the typical top tier decks that we see. So when someone plays a Magda and brings it to Marchesa and goes undefeated, wins in the final pod, flash speed on turn 4, shocking the entire world because Magda's a bad deck, a bad card. It can't win the game with Thassa's Oracle or Underworld Breach. It allows you to do a unique thing in the format where you surprise people, because in CDH, everything normal everyone knows about. Like they're gonna see Thassa's Oracle typically multiple turns ahead by the way you're tutoring and the way you're playing Magic. But when you're playing Hidetsun Kairi, Fibblefip, Valko, Spara, you're attacking at a different axis where maybe they overlook you or they don't see you tutoring for a weird piece like a Sanctum Weaver in Falco. Doesn't look super scary, it's just a 2-drop mana dork, but then you win the game off of it. It's those little things that playing Fringe you get to take advantage of.
There is, I think, kind of a double-edged sword that comes with playing Fringed, in that more cautious players not knowing what you're doing can lead to some poor threat assessment. I've seen it happen, but that's not always the case. And I mean, it's just totally dependent on your pod and the people you're playing with, and your own table talk as well, the way you present yourself and your board state.
Yeah, politics are always super important when it comes to Fringe decks. That's how you're gonna survive majority of your games. Is by talking your way out of it, is at least what I've experienced when playing Fringe decks. Because I can play Blue Farm. I played Blue Farm and have done super well with Blue Farm. But I kind of got the shut up and play mentality when I was playing Blue Farm. I didn't take my political game up a notch until I started playing Fibblefip and Mono Blue Teferi for majority of the games I played, or like Yisan, probably the most political deck I played. But it lets you improve different axes of your game by playing a Fringe deck that you don't have already designated combo lines. So what, like Nick, you're playing Falco right now. Why are you playing Falco? Like, it's a Fringe deck, obviously. Nick Hammond, Joking 101, it made an original primer for it, but you kind of flipped the entire deck on its head, did a 180 with it. Why are you enjoying the Fringe deck of Falco right now, or even Cormella? Why are those the two decks you're playing right now?
So I picked up Falco. I was just sorting through some bulk one day, and I had like some Capenna, and I found Falco, and I was like, "There's got to be something playable with this." And then, so I stumbled across someone else's primer who, when it originally had come out, they'd attempted to make a CH brew around it using Hermit Druid combos, and there's also a line using Devoted Druid and Sensei's Top. And I found that really interesting because Devoted Druid and Sensei's Top are cards that see play in certain decks, but they're not usually winning pieces on their own. Devoted Druid is, but only in decks that have an infinite mana outlet in the command zone, which Falco is not. So I thought it was unique, so I took the deck. I did some tinkering with it. I made a very bad first version of it, but I had fun playing it. It played in a unique way, because Falco focuses around the top of your library. You can cast from it if you meet certain restrictions. You have to pay mana cost still. You can't play lands off the top, and you have to remove counters off of creatures in addition. But it's that clause that enables the Devoted Druid line and several others. And I don't know, it's been a fun puzzle exercise to find new combos, and as new cards come out, adapt the deck. With Agatha's Soul Cauldron, the deck got a lot better. I have a lot more win lines. I'm entirely off of Hermit Druid, and it's been really fun to build something original and play it through a lot of games and just kind of watch it evolve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess that's also an interesting thing of when building a deck. All of us, many of the people in the Pacific Northwest, like to take a different angle on the deck. I'm thinking like Atlas. He has a Kenrith deck. He's like the top dog currently in the Pacific Northwest, but his Kenrith deck is like so unique compared to the other ones. Or like Dylan has a mid-range flash Rocco deck instead of a typically turbo deck, which I think is very, very cool to see that the community is so open to exploring a different venue of these already established commanders like Rocco or Kenrith, and twisting them in a way that fits their playstyle and our meta.
Yeah, I feel like the CEDH just community was so small for such a long time that it created kind of like this echo chamber, right? Where like people were like, "Oh, Blue Farm is the definitive best deck in the format," and then someone was like, "Hey, what about this like 2-drop little dude who says all your creatures tap for additional mana?" And everyone was like, "Wait, Kinnon's broken." And then like just slowly but surely the meta expanded. Tibet was printed, and like just every tournament a new deck just shows up and does well, and people are like, "Oh, this is like a real deck that people will play."
And it's
Like
fantastic
Derevi
because CDH
and
isn't
like
solved. It's still open. I
Yeah,
don't think
no,
it'll
by no
ever be
means.
solved with how many cards Wizards has printed and continues to print. People find some new broken thing every day. Well, not every day, but you know
yeah,
what I mean.
just about every day. Like I found Dance of Mini. It's a card from the Dark that I think is CDH playable. It's a 2-drop enchantment that's a clone. It just creates a copy of any creature. It's probably playable if we're playing Fimage, and now that Flesh Duplicate's playable. I think this card is probably also playable. It just needs to find the right home.
Which incidentally
Yeah,
you might
and I
be
think
playing, but
no, I think with every like new card that gets printed, like with each set, you're gonna see different decks just pop up. Like the One Ring just fueled like a bunch of the like probably one of my favorite decks, Arkham Dagsum. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yep.
Is that
yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
because
Arkham.
that deck was just unplayable. And then the One Ring got printed and people were talking about it. That and Thada Adele was also being talked about, which now sees play in the 99, not so much as a commander. But then, like, when I started going to Utah, which is a really different meta, someone just showed up with Arkham Dagsum and just, like, was undefeated to top 16. And it was like, hold up. This random mono blue commander that was just swept under the rug since what's the 6-man artifact? Whenever something enters the
Paradox
battlefield, you
Engine was
untap it.
banned.
Paradox Engine. Yes, its Paradox Engine was banned. And he just showed up and just took down this. I don't know. We had 98 players at that tournament, and I think he took fifth after not making top four. And it's just like one card just completely can just change so many decks in the format and make them playable.
Yeah, I think it's also just more than like one card. I think it's the accumulation of multiple cards throughout multiple sets that people aren't realizing go in the deck. Like Arkham, when Brothers War came out, it got a big upgrade with Portal of Phyrexia because it just sack a 1-drop creature, go get Portal. Your opponents lose their board because they all have to sacrifice 3 creatures, and then you get to return one of them each turn. Is just an utterly broken card for Arkham because it's a turn 2 play most of the time. But there's these cards that get added and printed over time that will improve a deck drastically. You just have to be able to look past the blinders of Blue Farm and realize what your deck's trying to do and find the cards for it.
Blue Farm is a scam. Wake up, people.
True. I do like the idea of there's a saying of like there's a mid-range, everything's turning mid-range. There's a mid-range singularity. Everything's gonna go to mid-range. I want to push a Fringe singularity. I would love to go to a 100-person tournament and every single deck had a different commander, or at least 10 cards different from each other. I think that's like the dream scenario in CDH, and I think we're realistically heading towards that with how much cards are CDH valuable, how many different decks and strategies. Like Blue Farm now has a turbo version, mid-range control, ad nauseum decks without ad nauseum now. So there's like 6-7 different Blue Farm decks. Rogsai Comedian made a control Rogsai deck, which is a fascinating deck to look at. I don't think it's that good, but it is super fascinating. Which I'm excited to see that everyone is playing bad cards now, or what were perceived as bad cards, because in reality, they just didn't have a right home until now.
Yeah, and if you look at like, I think it's definitely expanded with the introduction of online tournaments. Uh, like the most recent online tournament see if I can find it. Um, was topped by two Rakdos decks. Like, you had Floyan and Ob, Marnius Calgar. Like, I think there were zero wrong sides entered into the tournament. Um, which just shows the format's expanding. Like, you see Narsets and Derevis and just like all sorts of. There's a Galadriel in this tournament. Like,
Yeah,
it's just changing constantly. Uh,
I
and
think not having
the online tournament scene just
it's interesting because I think the non-commitment of not having to drive and make travel lodgings and all that preparation to go to a tournament makes people more comfortable with taking a deck they're not as confident in, like a deck that isn't tier 1 or 2. And I think that contributes to why we see Fringe, as people are more okay with taking a deck that they're not as confident in.
yeah, I think that's a good point. It is interesting that there is no ROG side, because I know some of the people down in Washington, um, had this theory of you're creating a unhealthy environment for the control and mid-range decks because you're lowering the time and getting rid of turns in CDH tournaments, especially online ones. I'm pretty sure Mox Masters is 80 minutes no turns currently is their rulings,
and I
because it
think the
goes,
turn ends at the end of the next phase.
yeah, so it's like a super short amount of time compared to what we're used to. So I'm surprised that we don't see a more Rogsire or more turbo lists. We're seeing a lot of mid-range decks like Marnius, Calgar, Florian, and Ob are all more mid-range decks. Karkin Sakashima is also mid-range. There's a Dahada in 5th place.
Yep.
That's more turbo. But other than the Dahada in 5th, everything else is mid-range, which I find fascinating.
Yeah,
That,
no, it's really interesting. And all of these decks are performing
yeah,
really well. Like, it's not like they're just going to the tournament and they're showing up. They're winning these tournaments. I mean, we had what, two back-to-back tournaments won by Malcolm Kedis.
yeah,
Like, and they're beating, I don't know, there's like 11 or 12 Sisseys in this tournament. There's 8 or 9, a few Dajilas, just like these top meta decks that people are like, oh, these are just like by far the best decks in the format. And people are just showing up with these undervalued decks and taking down entire tournaments. Um, it definitely shows growth within the format.
And I think there's some nuance to that. With like there's some sayings. I'm not quoting them directly because I don't remember the exact wording, but imitation will only ever get you as close to the original. You'll never surpass it. So
yeah,
people are starting to innovate, and instead of just copying or net decking the top list, even if you do that, it doesn't mean you're going to win. It's your piloting skill has to develop, and if you develop a list that works to your playstyle, you're probably going to perform better than playing someone else's deck that won a tournament.
yeah, that's a super good point. Like Atlas, he's got first, second, or top 4 in every tournament of the entire last year. Um, and I think I'm a pretty talented player myself. I was playtesting the deck and trying out his exact version of Kenrith, and everything went over my head. I can't understand the deck in a way that he can. Um, Obviously, I could probably get wins if I came down to like tournament and I needed wins, but Atlas brewed his deck to his playstyle to a point where he could understand it. I did that with Fibblefip. Like if I gave Fibblefip to other players without them reading the primer, they probably wouldn't know how to win the game with it, which is a fascinating perspective of CDH, is that you can tune these decks to whatever you want them to be. We have a Yeva player in the community that is on different Yeva lines than what the primer Yeva deck list on the CDH database is. So if anyone else picks up the deck without knowing those lines first, they're going to be clueless, which I think is fascinating because they're the combo lines that work for this player. Like Falco's that way as well, or the
Yeah,
Rocco list. there's different weird niches of lines that you can do to make the deck yours.
And even within the same list, like playing Falco, the list I'm currently on is still relatively new to me. So I'm still discovering new lines to win or new ways to move towards a win or accrue advantage, which has been fascinating to play out.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of time you put into a deck actually just correlates with the amount of wins you're able to get. There's a little bit of history over the last year and a half, 2 years. I played Fibblefip the most in tournaments in general. I think I played 4 or 5 tournaments with Fibblefip. And then Yisan I played in 2 tournaments. And then every other tournament I went to was played with a different deck. So I never got to connect with a deck or learn different and weird play patterns that other players who spend time with the one deck actually know. And I'm starting to do that with Hidetsu and Kairi right now. I'm on like month 2 of just only playing that deck, and I'm seeing new lines almost every time I play. I'm like, wait, in this situation I could do this. I can reanimate Hidetsu, put Enter the Infinite on top, and win at instant speed on my opponent's turn in response to a One Ring activation. It's a crazy place to realize that the more time you put into a deck, the better the deck ends up being. And I'm excited to see where that takes me because I'm grinding with Hidetsu. I think that's going to be the deck for the year, which is a weird thing for me. I'm going to have a lot of nights before tournaments where I'm shaking in my boots and I'm like, I need to build a new deck. This deck's not good enough. Let me play a weird mono blue deck that doesn't win games, but I won't lose. But yeah, I think deck experience and knowledge is gonna help people. Like we have a friend Parker. He's played like 3 decks his entire CDH career, but he masters those decks, and it's scary to play against once he's figured out how the deck works. Or like Dylan with Rocco now. There's probably lines that Dylan sees that majority of other Rocco players don't find.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been playing the deck almost a year now.
Yeah, almost a year now.
Since what, just after Oktoberfest?
Yeah.
Something like that. But and the deck has gone through a lot of iterations. I built it initially when it was the Turbo Rocco list where you go turn 2, play Arena Rector, and kill it. And I was looking at this deck, I was playing it for a while, and I'm like, there are 21 slots in this deck devoted to killing your own Arena Rector and consistently playing it. And I'm like, I feel like maybe you don't need to win the game on turn 2, and you don't need to waste 21 slots on removal spells.
Yeah, but it's so funny.
It is really funny to watch a Rocco go, I'm going to cast Mind Collapse and sacrifice my only land. And then see a counter spell.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
True. And so eventually I just started, I took out all those cards. I found some other lists that were closer to what I wanted to do. And just slowly started getting the deck to where it was still like it currently still is a fast deck. Like the deck can go top deck food chain win the game. Like that is a thing the deck can do. But with the printing of Gandalf specifically, I was like, hey, Flash is a busted mechanic. What if I just win on top of my opponents doing anything? That would be fun. And so I was like,
Yeah.
I just wanna enjoy playing this deck. Especially after playing Utah. Oh my gosh. Utah's meta is like Varigoth and Crick. And then like
Those are
Blue
gas
Farm.
decks.
And I'm like, it's just Oppo every game. And I'm like, how do I just get around an Oppo? And I was like, what if I just resolve a Yeva, and then in response to their Oppo, I just work like crazy.
Yeah, that is statistically the best counterspell is winning the game on top of someone else's win.
It does work.
It does.
That's why Born Upon a Wind is a broken card.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Born Upon the Wind just took like Fringe CDH to
Yeah,
another
propelled
level.
it.
Like the ability to present these weird lines that are really telegraphed at flash speed is really good.
Yeah. There's a combo line that I'm trying to write in words for my primer for Fibblefib that is revolving around Born Upon the Wind. I had to work out a few kinks for it right now, but it looks so good. I love the idea of being able to propose a win on someone else's turn. It's like everything I ever wanted to do in Fibblefib.
Yeah,
I
and
think
that gels with your philosophy of not being the first one to present a win on the stack.
Yeah, that is the biggest philosophy I have. That and don't always pay your taxes or don't cast anything. There's been games where someone's had a fish out for 4 turns, and I've just refused to play Magic until the fish is gone. It's annoying for the fish player, but they don't end up winning the game. And then obviously never be the first one to go for it. Always be second or third person to go for it. Your chances of succeeding then are gonna go up drastically. That's my philosophy now, and my deck building because of that has been so drastic. Instead of needing like 3, 4, 5 win cons where I can present multiple wins, I've been able to cut down to 1 or 2 where I'm just safer when I go for it, and I know that if I go for it, I'm most likely winning the game. Which is probably not the correct thing to do. You probably want multiple win cons, but that's just how currently I'm viewing the format. Because I know many other decks are jam-packed full of win cons because their idea is you can't stop them all, which is true. You can't stop all the wins.
you also can't present all the wins.
True.
Like, I feel like it's becoming a reoccurrent like theme within CEDH Masters is everyone will just sit there and someone will eventually attempt the win when they believe they have enough interaction.
Yeah.
And then either they succeed or they don't, and there's probably still interaction at the table. Because
Yeah.
people wait so long at this point to try to jam wins because they know they cannot win unless it's like turn 2.
Yeah,
And
it's
like
crazy.
Grand abolisher
you
effects are
just
the only surefire ways people are going for early wins a lot of the games. And even
Yeah.
those have gotten a lot riskier with the density of channel
channel
effects and
lands.
cards that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, channel
No,
lands,
I mean
touch the spirit realm, even Moonsnare prototype.
yeah.
Like, there's weird ways to get around a Grand Abolisher.
The
Yeah, or even
crab.
like Sky Turtle, the Crab, Nimble
The crab.
Obstructionist. Those are all getting played at least at least a little bit in our meta currently. Even if some of them aren't the best cards, they're still getting played, and it sucks to see them. Especially when you have a silence effect out, but that's part of the game, and I think they were needed in the game for the French decks to even have a chance, honestly. Because if
Yeah.
all you have to do is resolve a silence, you want the best cards to back it up. But now that it's more than resolve a silence, win the game, it's more like, okay, let me play my Grand Abolisher and hope someone doesn't have a Beseiju for my Underworld Breach. The games became more dynamic and more fun, honestly.
Yeah, it's
I
good to
mean
have a
like
lot of avenues of interaction.
yeah. And Grand Abolisher effects, I mean that is I mean they're probably the strongest they've ever been.
Yeah.
I
They're
mean
so important.
I'm running 3 in Morocco. Technically, I count Allosaurus Shepherd as a Grand Abolisher.
Yeah, it's pretty close to one.
It's
I'm
pretty
playing.
close.
I wish I could play some. I guess I could try finding room for like a defense grid in High Day, but I'm not winning that fast, so defense grid doesn't seem to make sense. But that's one thing I wish I could have. I've thought about like Narset's reversal, so I could steal someone else's silence. But let me
Yeah,
tell you, silence effects,
very
really
strong.
good, really good.
Yeah. But I don't think it's honestly, I'm at the point where I would prefer to in Morocco hold up mana with a flash effect in play than cast a Grand Abolisher. Because people will interact through a Grand Abolisher, but if I can wait till someone else has put a win on the stack and eaten a bunch of interactions, I feel like that's a better window than resolving a Grand Abolisher.
Yeah, I think it is too, which is why I like Hidetsu right now and Kairi, is that you're able to like stack your deck with like Vamp Tutor or Mystical Tutor, and then win on top of someone else's win, or like in response to like a Bowmaster triggers to kill you, or whatever it may be, you have the opportunity to win the game. In a position where everyone's already tapped out the Force of Will and Force of Negation out of the control player's hand after they drew 20 cards is already out of their hand, so now all you have to worry about is a Mind Break trap, and you're only casting 2 spells the entire turn until you have your entire deck in hand. Insane. It's kind of invaluable. I think Flash Speed's going to be the new norm going in. I don't think it's going to be with Born Upon the Wind specifically, but anything that gives flash, like in Rocco, your Gandalfs, your Yevas of the world, they're going to become more and more important, and I think they're going to have to start being viewed kind of as Grand Abolisher effects in some sense, because you're going to lose the game because of them.
Yeah,
I
like
want
I
to
had a
see
game.
that colorless deck, the Battle Thopter. I want to see him come back.
Oh yeah, he's so sick.
Sadly, the dude who was playing it was cheating, but
He was sadly cheating. There was another one
yes,
in the tournament who
there
got
was another one.
74th.
Oh, sad.
I feel like
Yeah.
surely
No,
there's got to be a way to make the deck perform without cheating, but that's a topic for another day.
if you
True.
start with a Mishra's or
Mishra's
it's the
Factory?
the one that taps for 3, you're
Yeah, it's
probably
either
winning that
Factory or
game.
Workshop. Yeah, you're probably winning. But that's
But
one card in 99 cards,
true.
so you can't guarantee you'll find it. I guess it
No,
just always have a wish board.
true. That's the way to play the game.
True.
Honestly. No, I had a game the other day where I resolved the Vivian, the 3-mana one that gives flash. And it just sat there for like 5 turns, and I was like, I'm gonna flash in Rocco, grab a dockside and win. And they're like, how'd you do that? And I'm like, you literally just left my Vivian on the board for like 4 turn rotations.
Yeah.
Like, it's flash. Like, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, you can just always wait until it's your time to pop off.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's drawing me to Cormella right now. We mentioned earlier that I was playing that, but a lot of the lines in the deck can be done at instant speed, or you slap Born Upon a Wind down and do them at instant speed. So
Yeah.
I found that to be very strong. And I haven't felt the pain so much of not having white for those Grand Abolisher effects because I don't need them as much.
Yeah, I'm kind of viewing Cormella and Hidetsu kind of at the same level right now, because I play with Nick all the time, and I get to play against Cormella all the time. The deck is just at a different speed to Hidetsu. Hidetsu's a control deck. Cormella's a turbo deck, but
Very
she has
turbo.
like a resilience to her that's so annoying to play against. He's like, I'll cast a turn 1 Adnaz, it'll get countered, and then he's like, I'll cast a turn 3 Adnaz, and I'm like, didn't we just counter Adnaz? And he's like, well,
Yeah,
yeah,
but I
but
brought it
Cormella.
back.
Yeah, and then there's always cuss words coming out, and then he's like, I win the game, it's not that bad. We can shuffle up again.
Guys. It's just Cormella. Just let it
Or I
live.
go to 1 life and lose.
True, that did happen.
As Adnan.
You did turn 1 Adnaz and lose.
Yeah, that's something I would like to get more of in PH or Crank. Is more. I think really the only way is Born Upon the Wind right now.
Emergent Zone.
Immersion Zone. I think I'm on it.
Yeah,
Maybe.
probably.
Find out.
There's technically, don't play it please, but
With
Tidal
Alderaan?
Barracuda.
Oh, it's a bad card.
Yes, it's a bad card. It's
It's
also
such a bad card.
technically a Grand Abolisher though, so
I've had
maybe.
players play it against me on Rocco, and I'm like, you You just gave me my best piece of my deck for free. Like,
Yeah.
it's a funny card.
Yeah, I lost to Parker in a tournament where I would have got a bye in the playoffs in top 10 if I won the game, but someone decided to flash in Tidal Barracuda and then put a wheel on the stack after Tidal Barracuda, and then it drew Parker into Dockside and a bounce spell.
Oh no.
There's a flash speed Dockside making 7 treasures. He wins the game off of that.
Ronald Baller. Dumb card.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
hold
Like-
some weird opinions here as a group, and I think one of them is Wheels bad. We don't like Wheels very much.
But I think that's just CDH at that point.
Yeah, I
at this
think
point.
CDH is just involved into that.
It's
I
leading
think
to
that
that point, but it's not all the way there.
I think
I
we
see too many of them
definitely
played still.
were early adopters of Wheels are bad,
Yeah.
but I think it's a growing philosophy that's just correct. Just like some
Yeah.
of my other philosophies that people don't believe me.
We will
Also-
discuss those at a later date.
True,
Quiet,
we could
Dylan.
probably
One
make a
card.
whole episode about my hot takes.
CDH
I
the
will
Lost.
rant about
Bailey's
Oppo
hot
with you
takes.
for hours, Bailey.
Yeah, there's a 4-drop artifact that gets played in like every deck right now. Probably not the best card ever.
Well, hold
I
on
think
here.
it should
Not
be
gonna name
played in
names.
most non-blue decks.
We'll save it for another episode.
We've had
Most of
this
my hot
conversation.
takes are cards that are underplayed.
Yeah, I don't have those because I just play
what's-
those cards.
What's the blue-white
Scheming Fence.
a Merfolk? No.
Oh,
Oh, we don't talk about Scrove. It's a pure
That's-
sight marrow for anyone who's wanting to actually look it up. There's an inside joke about it being called Scrove.
It's a great card, guys.
I'm not even going to defend it and say it's a good card, but I'm the one playing it, so there's that.
Yeah.
I
No,
played
Scheming
it
Fence.
in a Hermit Druid deck with 3
Scheming
basic
Fence,
lands.
though. I think Scheming Fence is a genuinely good card.
Creates
Yeah,
real
especially with the
funny-
One Ring right now.
I've never seen anybody play it against me, ever.
Hey, I copied yours.
That
You
is
did do
true,
that.
but you
And
didn't
then
play
took the
one.
text on yours
You
to
did
get
do
my
that.
One Ring deck.
Yeah.
Creates some
All right.
odd scenarios.
Do we have anything else we want to discuss before we wrap up here? Because I think we're
No.
probably at a pretty good
I
length.
think we're probably good to send them off. Well, thank you for listening. This was a CDH The Lost podcast.